In this class, our focus is the higher level development lifecycle. And to that end, we talked about requirements, we went into design phase, and then we kind of skipped implementation to go over into testing. And we're going to come back to that implementation phase now. It's super important, but as part of it, we have a choice that's normally made. It's actually normally made before I get into a lot of design. It's kind of an architectural choice of build versus buy. But this is a good time to come back to it because we have a good idea for how we would put this stuff together. And now we can kind of contemplate, now that you've thought about maybe designing a solution, in implementation, is it something that really truly does need a custom solution, or is it something that there might be something to help you already? Now, the vast majority of software applications assume build. You create a new software application yourself. It's not maybe always all new. Maybe you're using something you already had, some piece of software that's already in play. But generally speaking, it's something that you're responsible with, that you've customized, that you're the world expert on, and you and your peers are, and you're the ones who need to be accountable for providing this solution. The alternative to that is this notion of buying software. It's something that might be literally, hey, this does everything I want to. This is a time tracking piece of software that I can install on my servers, deploy, and be ready to go. It might be good enough for the requirements that you have. It could be something you purchased. It could be something you lease. It could be something that you get for free even out there. Now think of it this way. You're building a website. Most of your website is static HTML pages talking about the company and all that sort of stuff. That might be good enough. Instead of creating a server and writing all these pages yourself, going to one of these many sites online and using their tools to edit and allow this to be done on their site. You don't necessarily need to build all the custom HTML yourself if you're a small organization that wants to get up quickly. So it could be your job less to build something from scratch and your job to facilitate something being deployed, customized, and realized for the same solution. So we're going to talk about these decisions and kind of where to go. So how do we decide between that? Now, if it was an easy thing, we wouldn't need you. The whole point of this build versus buy decision is we need somebody with your training that you're getting now to come in and make the choice. And so money is clearly a factor, but if it was just a money choice, then we wouldn't need IT folks. You'd just say, how much does it cost to build? How much does it cost to buy? Okay, done. A lot of it comes down to what custom behavior do you really, really need? It's, the assumption is the person asks for something, they think they need it. They absolutely think it must be done that way. And your job sometimes is to come in and look at the alternatives and not necessarily make the choice for them, but to explain the choices for them. And so the other big aspect is short-term versus long-term. There might be different answers along the way. So is this a solution that's going to be around for a few weeks, a few months, a few years, or is it something that's going to be a key part of your business going forward? All of this stuff plays in to be weighed out, to be able to make a decision matrix. And that's what, again, you're being trained to do, to be able to, we're going to talk about here, how do I come up with these different trade-offs and make the choices appropriately? Because our general software process that we've talked about still applies to both. Whether I'm building or procuring a software solution, I still want to build requirements. I still want to have some level of design, maybe not as detailed. I still want to have some level of implementation. We're calling it code here, but maybe it's just releasing software. And I certainly need to test what's going on there before I put it out in front of users. So we need to take this as an alternative to one of the steps of the development lifecycle. The requirements are still key here. We want to know what a successful solution looks like. If a business team comes in and says, well, we need this product. Our requirement is implement this product. That might be the right solution, but we probably should go through and double check. Let's make sure we're capturing the needs they have. We'll look at some examples of this as we go. We want to be aware not to just assume that whatever the implementation is exactly what the need is. We wouldn't want to assume that the requirements are an exact representation of what the client needs if they're not written very, very clearly, and certainly not putting too much implementation details inside of there. We want flexible requirements. We want to be able to defer the exact decision on certain pieces to be able to optimize the cost and the time to market and the the maintainability and all those sorts of things. We don't want to accidentally restrict solutions that could happen later on. I mean, the famous story, Kodak film was the first to invent the digital camera, but they said, we like film. We make a lot of money off of film. So they essentially suppressed the technology, ignored the technology, and now where are they? They're almost out of business because they could have owned that market, but they walked away. Again, that was restricting the solution space to say, hey, we only want this very traditional solution to our problem. And so we want to be able to understand what the original ask is, because we might need to alter things over time as technology changes, as demands change, as needs change. So a good example of this. Let's say we have a requirement out there that says the system must be able to print PDF files. And so this could very easily be you going off and coding a PDF feature. And that's something that you might have said, well, the vendor software doesn't have the ability to print a PDF, and so we have to code this by hand. Where the real requirement, if you ask behind the scene, was we need to make a non-modifiable electronic format. And so maybe it could have been an email, or it could have been a web page that gets printed by a plugin. So you pull a new web page that you create that then goes and requests the web page from the vendor site and then prints it to PDF as a plugin. We don't know that PDF was absolutely the requirement. Maybe there's a better way to do it. Maybe we get a JPEG image off of it, because the PDF is still modifiable in the right software terms. So there might be a lot of different ways that you could have skinned that solution to come up with a good way of presenting the information, where we jump to a how solution, a PDF file, instead of saying, well, what do you really need? And so when we get to the design phase, we want to establish what are the true architectural needs. What's the hardware that we really, really need in each of the scenarios? Often it's much the same. Or maybe what we're doing is we're externalizing things. Sometimes you say, well, the cloud, we don't have to pay for it. We just lease this hardware. We don't have to maintain it. We don't have to worry about this stuff. But then you have to worry about security and data breaches and backup and things like that. What's the security in place? What's the network setup needed? And then implementation is often cheaper, so it seems, to buy something over build something. It takes time and money to build stuff. Buying stuff, it's immediately available. So we need to say, okay, well, great, it's cheaper there, but what's the support over time? What needs to happen? What jobs need to be rescheduled? What's the maintenance needs? If we have a vendor solution that requires somebody to spend an hour a day commanding something to happen or double checking something, well, that's 365 hours a year of support cost. Do we have the ability to give that to somebody who's existing, or do we have to hire somebody just to cover an hour a day? And probably several people, because people don't work just an hour a day. They work many hours a day, and they don't work 7 days a week. So we need to understand what's the maintenance needs of the solution. We need to understand the design impact of a full solution, not just the surface product that we're receiving. And so when we implement whatever we're going to get, we have to understand what is the customization that needs to happen. It's probably not perfect out of the box. Somebody needs to configure it, somebody needs to install it, somebody needs to set up database connections, somebody needs to tell it what color the screens are going to be. What's the level of effort in doing that customization? Do we need to have additional scripts or code that supports that implementation? Maybe we have file formats that we have to turn into a different format, or upload into databases, or we have to extract reports from the databases that don't exist inside of there. So let's figure out what the customization plans is. What are we truly using out of the box, and what do we need to build additional stuff on? It's not necessarily saying we don't buy. It's just saying what is the full cost of buying and deploying and everything like that. So installation, then we have to understand, what's the install look like? Do we have to set up environments? How do we maintain this environments? What's the licensing look like? Is it licensed per server? So if we have a test server, do we have to pay for that server to be licensed? It takes a lot of time to account for all this stuff. It takes a lot of time to manage all of this stuff. And that's where the trade-offs come in. You are giving up certain flexibility at the cost of savings, but is that cost worth it? Is that trade-off worth it? And often it is, but it's not always. Testing really is much the same. Just because we buy it doesn't mean we can trust that it's going to work. We still want to validate what's going on. We might not need to do as much detailed testing, but we still need to do testing. It might mean, though, that if we find a bug, we don't know when it will be fixed. If that vendor doesn't release until next month or next quarter, we might be sitting around with a bug that might be unacceptable or certainly a hindrance to our application that we cannot fix ourselves. And so we might not do as much unit testing. Functional testing is still vitally important. User acceptance is still super important. And I also need to check performance, particularly since I can't control it. I might have to tune it. I might have to get external resources to come in and help me with that. So the last thing I want to consider, as I said, is support. What do I need to do to support this tool? What do I need to do to archive log files or maintain log files or archiving data coming in and out or cleaning up databases over time? How do I handle issues, open tickets, send it accordingly? How do I debug things overall? So what about patches that occur? When is your release cycle for patches? What's the risks that are involved? Do I have to pay for patches? The server maintenance then, do I have to worry about operating system patches, or do I update the hardware? Do I have to get bigger hard drives from time to time? Do I have to swap out those hard drives? Is there specific hardware requirements needed? I need to understand the technical administration side as well as the business execution. So how do I help support the system? How do I deal with users who forget their passwords or other metadata that's out there, customizations for how the software behaves, for where it runs, where it stores files, connections to other systems, reports that get generated, how often, where do they get sent, and then what's my relationship with the vendor I bought it from? What does my support contract look like? How often do they help us? Basically, how viable of a company are they, and are they going in the same direction as we are as far as this product is viewed as? So I'm asking a lot of questions right here. And the next discussion is how do we get to a choice inside of that? These are a lot of things I want to understand. Now, it's probably less work than building a system, understanding all this stuff, especially if it's very, very complicated. There's a lot of advantages to this, and we want to get into some of the intangibles that we're going to talk about as well, and we'll get to that as we look at how we proceed from discussing the attributes of the system, particularly the system we're looking to buy. We need to analyze and understand that system very, very well and be able to understand it compared to the solution that we would be building from a functional standpoint as well as a cost standpoint. But then there's some other intangibles we want to try and measure and, if not quantify, at least capture as we move into making a decision. That's our next step, is going through and making that choice.